Hi there, welcome to the fourth video on Mission 7. And in this series of videos, we're going to be talking about the special senses. So we'll do the taste, touch, and smell with this video. Then video 5 will be vision, and video 6 will be smell. So let's proceed with this to learn about our taste, touch, and smell. First, we're going to look at touch. Let me move myself up here. This involves obviously your skin. And so the picture you see here is a cross section of a piece of skin. And I do have a model that I'll show you here in just a minute of the things that we're going to talk about. But essentially, there's different kinds of touches that we can experience whenever these different nerves are stimulated. The first one that we're labeling is the free nerve ending. And you'll notice that it travels pretty far up towards the surface of the skin. Would be the surface of the skin, your epidermis, and right near the base of that, you have these free nerve endings, and these will sense pain, temperature, touch, and pressure. So they're pretty much your all around sense anything nerve, but notice that it doesn't completely go through the epidermal tissue. That's why you can take a pin or something and touch the edge of your epidermis and you don't really feel pain because you haven't gotten to the nerve yet. But these are free nerve endings. There's nothing, no special structure associated with them. The next one down the line here is called the Meissner's corpuscle. It's this funny squiggly looking thing. And it says it's encapsulated. That means it's around, there's this capsule around it. And you find these mostly in skin that doesn't have any hair. And it can detect light touch. When your hair moves, that's kind of the same sensation that you would get with these Meissner's corpuscles. So if there's no hair, like on your face, you don't have a ton of hair like you do on your head. So just that very light touch when someone just barely touches you, you're stimulating the Meissner's corpuscles that are in your dermal tissue. This right here in the skin is the dermis. That starts the dermis. This whole section here is the dermis, if you recall from the skin. The little line here is referring to the dermal papillae. These are your fingerprints, the ridges that form your fingerprints. So right underneath there, you have this nerve that can detect light touch. The next one is called Merkel's disc. Get rid of that so you can see it. So drag this line over this box over there. These also detect light touch, but also pressure. Then the square over here is pointing to the hair follicle receptor. So whenever your hair moves, you have nerves here right around the root of the hair that can detect the movement of your hair. The next one looks like a little spaceship, is called the Ruffini's corpuscles. These will detect very deep pressure. So if someone's pushing on your skin, you feel that as pressure, and also stretching of skin. So if you just start pulling on your skin and you feel that sensation, that is because of the Ruffini's corpuscles that are being stimulated. And the last one that involves deep pressure and also vibrations are called Pacinian corpuscles. And they have this really long, oblong shape. So some of them overlap what they detect, but some of them are very unique. So depending on what it is you're trying to experience and the information you're trying to get from the outside world to send to your brain, remember this is the peripheral nervous system. These are peripheral nerves that are bringing information toward the brain. These are efferent nerves. So let's look at a model of the skin. There we go. And I'll show you these things close up. I'd like to turn this light off so you can see a little better. Okay, so here's the hair sticking out. So obviously these yellow nerves, the nerves are always yellow in any kind of model. These would be those nerves associated with the hair follicles. So when the hair moves, you're feeling the sensation of the movement of your hair. The free nerve endings are going to be these yellow ones. They're the ones that go the highest up. Here's your epidermis. So you don't have these in the epidermal tissue. So that's what I was saying. If you stick a little pin, something in your skin, like just to that point, you would not be able to feel a sensation. You don't feel it until it gets to about there. So something sticking in your, or poking you may not necessarily, you'll be able to feel that until it gets to this layer of the skin. The Meissner's corpuscle are these here. So those little, the second one you see on that. The Merkel's disc, it's hard to see them on this one, but it's basically this little thing right there. Notice they're right next to this, the Meissner's, just like it is in the picture that you have. I don't have Ruffini's on here, but the Pacinian corpuscle is this really big one right here. Okay, that's the one that does the deep pressure and the vibrations. So whenever all this tissue starts vibrating for whatever reason, then that's, you're sensing that when SpaceX launches a rocket, is the most obvious thing I can think about. That's when these are being stimulated. This stuff down here on the diagram is the fat tissue that you see in the model. Okay, that is pretty much it for touch. So stop here if you need to wait a little bit and make sure you get all the squares in the right spot. Okay, we are coming back now. And let's talk about taste. Get myself over here. So you have two big squares of notes, information, and turn this back on. Notes, information that you're going to drag one of them here, and then another one will go over here, and then we're going to look at the taste bud here. So this is the square you should be putting in that blank spot where it talks about taste. So this is obviously your tongue, and both taste and smell, the type of receptors that are in your tongue and up in your nose are sensitive to chemicals. Touch, the ones we just went over, were stimulated by, or the type of receptors they are called mechanoreceptors because they involve movement, a lot of them. For taste and smell, though, they're stimulated by chemicals, whether you're dissolving the chemical in your mouth with your saliva and stimulating the taste receptors, or when you smell, you sniff a chemical up into your nose, then that is going to dissolve in the mucus in your nose and stimulate those receptors. So taste, tongue, we have those bumps on our tongue. Those are called papillae. And inside the papillae is where you find the taste bud. You probably have heard that term before, taste bud, but it's actually inside the bumps. The bumps on your tongue aren't your taste buds. They're inside those bumps. And the taste buds are the chemoreceptors. And this picture you see down here is a picture of a taste bud that is inside the papillae. The papillae is these little squares of flat squamous cell epithelial tissue. So the taste bud is inside that papillae. You'll notice that there's, at the top of each taste bud are these teeny tiny microscopic little hairs. And these are the things that are sensitive to the chemicals. So here's the surface of your tongue up here. And so whenever you eat something and chew it up and mix it in with the saliva, that's one of the functions of saliva, is to stimulate the taste cells. Then it's going to stimulate these little hairs. These hairs are basically the ends of these neurons. So these are neurons. We talked about that in the last section of the first part of this mission. And inside there, these are the cells. The neurons are right here at the base of the cell. So you have this gustatory cell hair that's getting stimulated, and it'll send an impulse here across this nerve. And then that will all go to your brain, and that's recall in the temporal lobe, where you perceive the taste or the sense of taste. Now, children have a lot more taste buds than adults. That is so their as when they're young, they will really enjoy the taste of things to start learning how to eat. As you get older, some of those taste buds aren't as active. And so if you are ever around really older folks, which hopefully you will be at some point here at Guaca, when you do some clinical rotations, so a lot of the older people don't really like to eat because they can't really taste much anymore. And if you can't taste it, then it's not near as fun to eat. Kind of like when you have a cold and you can't taste your food, it's like, I don't really want to eat because I can't enjoy the taste of it. This portion right here is called the chemoreceptor. This is the actual thing that is sensing the chemical. This is part of that nerve, and then here's the nerve fiber attached at the distal end of the chemoreceptor. This other cell next to it is just a support cell to kind of protect the neurons here so they can work properly. So that is taste. I wanted to show you another little bit. You don't have to fill anything in. This is just kind of some information. This word gustation is just a fancy name for tasting. And so that's why the gustatory epithelial cell is the thing that has the taste receptor in it. Those other support cells that I was talking about here, let's go back. This basal cell right here, those are the ones that make new chemoreceptors. Why would you need new ones? Well, like this slide talks about, goodness. If you burn your tongue, then you're damaging the gustatory epithelial cell and you can't taste anymore. That's why you can't taste after you burn your tongue. So you have to make new ones. It takes a little bit for you to taste on that area again, and that's because you have to wait for that epithelial cell to make the basal cell, to make another gustatory epithelial cell. This just shows you the pathway. The sensory receptor is going to send an action potential. That's what AP stands for. And this will send a signal to the gustatory cortex of the brain, which is in your temporal lobe, this one here on the side. And it will that will cause your brain to stimulate digestive enzymes, because when you taste something, it's telling your brain, hey, we got food coming down here in a little bit. We need to start digesting, getting ready for digestion. So we'll kind of come back to this a little bit when we study the digestive system next semester, because that's telling your brain that you're fixing to get some energy, which is good. So that's the basics on taste. Now, you'll see in some of the activities coming up that we have basically 5 different taste sensations, and the receptors for those tend to be concentrated in certain areas of the tongue. For example, sweet taste is typically more in the tip of your tongue, and then you have salty here. Sour is back towards the back of your tongue, and then you have bitter. Like if you drink coffee, if you notice the back of your tongue, you can kind of taste that bitter aftertaste after you've had some coffee. It's because it's stimulating there's more of the bitter taste sensors here at the back of your tongue. And then also kind of at the back, you have this other one called umami that kind of is just a savory type, like if you eat a steak and it's just got that really good savory taste, that's from the umami taste sensations on that part of the tongue. All right, so then let's look at smell. Move myself over here. So you'll want to drag this big rectangle over here with smell, and the word for that, fancy science word for that, is olfaction. Olfaction is smell. Now, we often talk about smelling with our nose, but the receptors are actually way, way up here. If you could stick your finger up in your nose and you couldn't even get to this point where the smell receptors are. So when an odor chemical comes in your nose, if you just follow my little arrow up here, it has to travel all the way up here to actually have you sense that smell. That's why if you sniff, if you're trying to smell something and you can't really smell it that well, but if you take a deep breath in with your nose and kind of deeply sniff that, it forces the chemical up here quicker, and it can stimulate more cells as well. So you sense that smell a lot sooner, and even at a higher concentration. So that's what you're doing when you take that deep sniff in with just your nose and not your mouth. You're helping that come up here. Okay, so this here is a picture of this just enlarged. So I'll go over that in just a second. Like right now. Okay, so it actually has, let me just fill these in. Okay, so that's what's called your olfactory epithelium. So this is the epithelial tissue that's way up here at the very superior portion of your nasal cavity. This is your nasal cavity right here. Then down here you have the olfactory hairs that are going to be sensing the chemical, just like we have in our tongue where you have these little hairs. You're going to see a pattern with most of these sensory things is there's tiny little microscopic hairs attached to the neurons. You have them here too, olfactory hairs. So these hairs are just barely sticking out of the epithelium. And that's where the chemical is stimulating. And then you have this mucus layer to keep them moist, so they don't get all dried out. It's harder to smell things the drier your nasal passages are. That's why when it's cold outside and you kind of have this drying sensation of the nasal passageways, you can't really smell as well. And on the opposite of that, this is disgusting maybe to you, but one time I had someone ask me, why does a fart stink more in the shower? It's because the odor that's associated with the release of your gas can travel a lot better in moist environments, and you can detect it better and it's stronger because of the moistness of the environment because of the extra water that's in the air. That's why also, this is a little nicer to talk about, but that's also why after it rains and you go outside, everything smells fresh and really good because there's more moisture in the air and your nasal passageways are more moist as well. This is another support cell, just like we saw in the gustatory taste bud. If there's too much mucus here, there is some here normally, but if you have a bunch of mucus up in your nose, it kind of covers the olfactory hair completely. So you can't really smell either. Like when you have a stuffy nose, when you have a cold or allergies, the reason you can't really smell at that point is because you have so much mucus covering up the olfactory hair. So let's look a little bit more at some smelling stuff. So again, both smell and taste are involving ketone receptors. It's a chemical sense. That's the type of receptor that detects the molecule. So it needs to be dissolved in fluid, either the fluid that's in our nasal membrane or in the saliva if it's in our mouth. Here's a kind of a better picture of this smelling apparatus. Because of the different colors, and I'll show you here in some models in just a minute. But the odor is the gas that we smell from the particular molecule that it is. Once it hits this olfactory epithelium in the roof of the nasal cavity, you've got all these nerves, and I just talked to you about that. These are all going to leave that area and actually go through a bone. Okay, this is the base of your skull. This bone right here is called the ethmoid bone. You didn't have to learn that one with the bones, with the skull. But the nerves go through this bone and all come together to form what's called the olfactory bulb, because it looks kind of like you got this enlarged area that will then converge into the olfactory nerve. So this is the first of the nerves. This nerve is attached to your brain. So let me kind of show you how these are connected. But first, here's a model. So here's a model of the nose. So this way up here is the bone that I was talking about. This is the ethmoid bone. It's the same one that's pictured right here in yellow. So that's the nerves are sitting right here. So again, there's quite a bit of distance from your nostrils, the opening to your nose, all the way that molecule chemical has to go all the way up here before it even stimulates one of the smelling nerves. So if you're just sitting there and someone comes in with perfume, you don't smell it right away. That odor has to diffuse through the room and get to your nose and go up here unless you start sniffing really hard, then you can smell it sooner. So that's a side view, kind of like what you see on this picture in the slide. Let me show you the skull. So here's the skull. This should look familiar to you. Okay. And then inside here, if we look on the base, I can't really see if I can get that a better. No, I cannot. That's better there. Get a shadow there. Right here is the ethmoid bone. So that's the bone I'm talking about when I'm mentioning this bone right here. Okay, so that's, let me angle it so you can see. Here's the nose. These are the nasal bones right here at the top part, but this is where you'd be sniffing. So if we send it on up there, the other pencil would come out here if I didn't have the bone. So this is the ethmoid bone. And if you were to look closely at it, you can't really see it here, but there's tiny little holes. It looks like it's porous, like a sponge. And that's because the nerves come through those holes. That's what those are for. And then here's a model of the brain that we looked at with the last unit. And this right here is that first olfactory bulb. So you can kind of see, change the angle. So here's the bulb part right here, and then it connects to form the nerve. So this nerve is actually in your brain. So how does this kind of sit? Now these aren't exactly the right size, but this is how it would be in your body. So that first nerve, the olfactory bulb, that first blue thing you see would sit right there where that ethmoid bone is. And so those nerves would come through the top part of your nasal cavity and attach to that olfactory bulb. And then it would bind to receptors. The action potential goes through the nerve into the ethmoid bone, eventually to the bulb, and then it connects to the brain. Now, what's cool about smell is that the signal gets sent two different places. First, it gets sent to the frontal lobe, and the frontal lobe, remember, is this part, and that will identify the smell. You go, oh, that's a skunk. And you also have these nerves that are going to the emotional pathway in our limbic system. So smells can trigger memories and emotions because of where the nerve impulse is traveling. That's why you smell, I think I mentioned this before when we talked about the brain, you smell banana bread cooking and it reminds you of maybe a special person in your life, or maybe it's a reminder that maybe someone in your family cannot cook it very good and you don't want to eat it. But these emotions and memories are triggered because of where the nerves are going to in the brain. Okay, so that is the end of the this video on smell, taste, and touch. So I will see you again when we talk about vision. So have a great day.